Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Welcome to Face to Face. This is our 31st episode of the season, and we figured we'd look back on some of our favorite moments from Season 9. We've tackled some heavy issues over the past year, including the ongoing crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, racism in institutions of all levels, and the ongoing discovery of suspected unmarked graves on the grounds of former residential schools. Earlier in the season, we sat down with residential school survivor Lorraine Seymour.
Well, I went in there when I was, I guess 6. My mom dropped me off there, and I'll always remember the print of her dress as she's walking away. So that's always stayed with me, that part of being dropped off there. I guess the greatest thing I got out of attending residential school was developing a grit to survive things. Like we didn't really have a system in my family that we prayed or anything like that. So when I went into school, I learned how to pray to Virgin Mary. And in that experience of learning about, the creation story of the Catholic, I discovered a love that Virgin Mary had for her son. So I hung on to that. That was mine. I hung on to that with my dear life. So I'd often go to this little place where Virgin Mary, there was a statue there. So I'd go there, and that would be my safe place, away from the altered boys and everything that was happening in that place. And so yeah, that's a little bit of it.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about your trip to Musqueam in a bit to see the Pope's apology, but you've stayed, it seems, pretty close with some of your classmates from school?
Yes, that we'll always have a connection without even seeing each other often. We just know, we just have that love for each other and that support for your comrade kind of thing, I guess. Yeah, it's a hard feeling to have, when you see somebody, and it's good to see them out and about, because really there's always death in our communities, and it's never ending.
When the news started going public, I guess, about the findings of the suspected unmarked graves at the sites of these former schools, what was going through your mind?
Well, I was taking this graduate course at U of M called Barriers for Indigenous People. So I ended up having to retake that course because they wouldn't. What happened was I went into a kind of like a depression. I got really sad, and it was really hard for me to get out of bed for a few weeks. And then, even with doctor's notes and all of that stuff, they wouldn't let me pass, because I'm really a smart person. I can write and everything, but that knocked me to my knees, and I couldn't stand up and do my work for a couple of weeks. And then I ended up having to take that graduate course called Barriers for Indigenous People. So that's part of colonization, and that becomes part of my story too. So that's what I was doing. I actually got really sad. Not that because I didn't know it, I always knew it. I always knew there was people that didn't come back, and my friends and my family always talked about, Charlie Wenjack and him freezing, trying to walk from CJ to where he came from and where he died on the tracks. And my parents always told us which way he went, and they made sure that we committed to not running away, to survive this place. Yeah.
Shortly after our interview with Lorraine, we sat down with Kimberly Murray, the independent special interlocutor for missing children, unmarked graves, and burial sites associated with Indian residential schools.
I think one of the things that is really coming to light is that there's so much more truths that have to be told. And as we find more records, as we hear from more survivors, we're really seeing this trading or transferring of the children from one institution to the other. And that these entities and organizations that operated the Indian residential schools and the federal hostels we're also operating the hospitals, and we're in the other types of institutions, the sanatoria and the reformatories. And so those same things that happened to the children in the residential schools were happening to them when they got sent to these other institutions. I think that's part of the history and the truth that is really starting to come out now that the TRC didn't talk about.
Part of this role as well is education, public awareness. There's a whole segment of the media who have big columns who write that there have been nobody found in these graves yet, that despite the oral history, despite what the TRC had to say, that this isn't proven. What do you say, and how do you overcome that in the public?
Well, one, it's false reporting, because there are known burials and there are actual examples of children's bodies washing up because when the riverbank and the water came up, bodies came out of the ground. That happened at Dumbo. Those were Indian residential school children buried on those grounds. Just because we have GPR now and we're not disturbing those burials doesn't mean those burials aren't there. We know there are kids buried on Indian residential school grounds. There are photographs of funerals happening on Indian residential school grounds with children at the children carrying the coffins, with the children standing there as the other child is being buried. We have survivors that have talked about being the ones burying them. So that's just false reporting. And people need to do a better job and read the TRC report and know that there are plenty of examples of children being buried on these grounds.
We also spoke with a number of MMIWG advocates this season, including Ali Bear, the third Vice Chief of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, who recently questioned the Prime Minister about the issue.
Well, I wanted to make it aware to him that this is a crisis and a state of emergency across Canada. There was a lot of discussion around different issues, and this wasn't brought up. And according to the MMIW 2S+ inquiry, this is actually amounts to cultural genocide. So we need to continue to discuss this ongoing genocide that's happening here in Canada.
You mentioned in that, when you were asking your question, that the women are afraid in their own communities. Can you talk about that?
Well, the colonial violence has now turned into lateral violence. And so the patriarchy, the misogyny, all of that has become deeply embedded and entrenched within society, but our communities as well. So when you have wider society looking at Indigenous women like they are unfortunately, disposable and less than, then we also have our own people starting to view Indigenous women the same way. And so we have a lot of situations that need to be addressed internally at home when it comes to domestic violence situations and protecting our women and children.
He gave what seems to really be the go-to answer for a lot of government officials now, and that's that there's always much more work to do. What did you think of his response to your question?
I think he's very good at, speaking to these types of issues, but I want to hold him to that. I want to hold him to what he said to me because he said it directly to my face, that we are going to be able to work on this together.
Coming up after the break, we're going to continue to look back on some of our favorite moments of the 9th season of Face to Face, including our interviews with Paulina Alexis, Tina Keeper, and Isaac Murdock. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Over the past 30 episodes, we've had a chance to cover a lot of arts, entertainment, and sports, from musicians to hockey players, producers, and more, including Reservation Dogs star Paulina Alexis. And Paulina, the list of projects that you've been involved with so far are certainly impressive. Was acting something that you knew at a young age you wanted to get into?
Yes, acting. And films, I've always loved movies since I was a kid. Back then we didn't have phones or anything. All we had was our imagination and outside. And my dad, he owns a little production company, so he has this office of cameras and computers, and like as a kid, like me and my brothers would go and like steal his cameras and like go make our own skits with our cousins. I remember me and my cousin used to make like little Lord of the Rings skits, Maury skits, Power Rangers, and like Mortal Kombat and stuff like that. I feel like we have a lot of home videos of like just me and my brothers like just going action, cut, and like bunch of different scenes and like just unedited. Like, yeah, it's like acting is something I've always seen myself doing as a kid, but like I never like said it out loud because like we didn't have any role models like at the time. Yeah, sure, there was like Adam Beach and like Gary Farmer, like Eddie Spears, all the legends, and like, but like I'd never, like with Reservation Dogs, it's like we're finally representing ourselves in a truthful way and telling our own stories instead of like just following a script of how other people think we are. So yeah, acting, like getting Reservation Dogs is like my dream role because like I basically get to play myself, and like it's like I get to represent like all Turtle Island as well, and like, yeah.
Paulina Alexis wasn't the only actor we sat down with this season. We also did back-to-back episodes with legendary actress, producer, and politician Tina Keeper, and had the chance to talk about the impact of North of 60.
We had no idea. To this day, the co-creator, Barbara Samuels, and I, we're good friends, and we still cannot get over it to this day. I think on any project, and I know as a producer and as an actor, when you're on other people's projects, you're always aiming for the magic, but you don't know what's going to hit. You really don't, So I think for this show, from my perspective, I thought Canada is not going to accept a predominantly Native cast. It's set in an Indigenous community. This is too foreign for Canadians, and I didn't think it would last more than one season. And so we were all really surprised by just how well it did. It was really incredible. It didn't sell outside of the Canadian market, because I know, like, for Americans, they would be thinking, well, what are the RCMP and what's the NWT? Right. And then a lot of, I think, other buyers in the world felt, well, where's the teepees and where's the horses? The concept of, a northern Dene, we were South Slavey, representing the South Slavey people, was just outside of, a lot of the international buyers' idea about what Indigenous people were. So I think in that regard too, it was really important in Canada. I think it was really, it just humanized, I think, the stories, and people understood the stories as being universal. Like, there are so many storylines on North of 60 that, resonate to this day. Mm-hmm. I still, have people that come to me and stop me, and, this is 30 years later, and they talk about a storyline that was meaningful to them in whatever way. And whether it's from a Canadian perspective or from an Indigenous perspective, it's really interesting in that regard. It really touched a lot of people, and I feel that it was, as an actor, it was an exercise that was really amazing. It was, there was like, it was done at a time when Canadian television was really, I think, funded to be really, really, just really broad and bold. And I think that, at that time, there was probably 11 Canadian dramas on Canadian networks. Mm-hmm. So that is a lot. That was a lot of Canadian television, and that was great. I mean, that was a great opportunity for us to be part of that. We were able to shoot 90 episodes in 5 years. We did 5 TV movies. Mm-hmm. And And then I think we really, we became part of the Canadian television landscape. And that's, I think, really important for, Indigenous people.
Another storyteller of a different kind we sat down with was Ojibwe artist Isaac Murdock. Because I think a lot of people would recognize your work. It's been front and center at a lot of rallies, a lot of actions. Do you feel like art can promote change?
I think art is something that has been used by our people for thousands and thousands of years to showcase the spirit of who we are. And so when you look at the old pictographs that the Anishinaabe made, the Muznabiaganan, you'll notice that those pictures that were painted on those rocks are still alive today. They still tell stories today. They still invoke the spirit of who we are today. And I don't think that there's much difference between art and ceremony, because it's all about spirit and bringing the spirit out of people, for something better. And so I think that art does that so perfect.
That is an amazing answer. Do you have like examples that come to your mind of, seeing art uniting people?
Yeah, so for example, at Standing Rock, there was an image that I figured would be good with Thunderbird Woman. And so I had some people were screaming on the phone with me saying, we need Thunderbird Woman because there's going to be these big protests coming. And I'm like, click, I don't know who you are. I don't even know what you're talking about. And people are like, you gotta let us use Thunderbird Woman. And finally I said, yeah. And it was like Clayton Thomas Mueller and David Solnit and those guys were like, let us use your art, please. Mm-hmm. And once it did, it just took off. My art just went global after that.
And, I think people, whether they know it or not, have seen your art everywhere. Standing Rock is certainly one of those places. Where has your art turned up?
I've had pictures of like really cool African tribal people holding up my art, in the desert in Africa. I've had it show up in New Zealand, Australia, Tibet, mm-hmm. Mongolia. All over Europe and South America and all over the world, and some really cool people have tweeted my art, which is kind of neat, when you see Joaquin Phoenix holding my art, it's like, that's so strange, yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah, I bet that never gets old. What was it like, starting to see your art really going global?
Surreal, and it kind of still is, yeah. My art's a lot more famous than I am. Nobody knows who I am. Right. They're like, hey, I know that picture. But I'll be walking down the street, but I don't know that guy, So it's kind of nice because I never really copyrighted my art. And I said, this art is for the people. It's for them to use to fundraise for their own initiatives for the earth and water. And don't even cite me, don't credit me. Just use it. If you want to make t-shirts and try to make money for your cause, go for it. And so the art has always been used that way, and I think that's how it's gotten to travel so far and free. It is surreal. It's like how did that happen?
Mm-hmm. What an inspiration Isaac is. Time now for us to step aside for another quick break here, but we're heading out of the studio. When we come back, stick around. There's more Face to Face to come. Welcome back to the season finale of Face to Face, where we're taking a look back at some of our favorite moments from this season. And for me, one of those moments was when we got out of the studio and hit the ice with Métis curler Carrie Anderson. Carrie was fresh off her 4th straight win at the Scotties Tournament of Hearts and preparing to head to Sweden for the Women's World Curling Championships. Not only was Carrie generous enough to take the time to do the show, she was also willing to go one-on-one with me on the ice. Here's some of that from Carrie's home turf, the Gimli Curling Club in Manitoba. Oh, lots of speed.
Yep.
Nicely done. Carry with the hammer.
Nice shot.
Oh, wide open for you.
Yep. Clean.
Dang. Nicely done.
Woo! Woo!
Oh yeah, there it is. Hard carry, hard. Go, go.
Nice!
Yes.
Woo!
Beauty.
Skips can
Picture.
sweep.
Whoop.
Whoa. Really close.
Oh, right. Try that.
Ooh, we got lots of weight. We're on the front.
Come on, get over. Oh yeah. Stay on it, stay on it. Ah! That would have been a beauty.
That would have. Yeah, line. Yep. Hard.
Trying to make me sweat.
Hard. Hard. Keep going. Keep going. Line's perfect.
Oh wow, nice shot.
Hard. Good brushing. Weight's
Oh, come on,
perfect.
come
You
on,
just
come
need
on,
the
come
line.
on.
Ah! Oh, shoot.
So close.
Ah.
Thanks, Carrie. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Carrie and Team Anderson went on to win bronze at the Women's World Curling Championship. Congrats to them. That is all the time we have for this week on Face to Face, our 9th season finale. If you've missed any episodes from the past season or any other season, they're all available over on our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also listen to any episode. They're all available as podcasts, and you can download those wherever you get your podcasts. We'll only be pausing for a short while, though. We'll be back in the fall with Season 10 of Face to Face. Thanks for watching, and we'll hope you'll be joining us then. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great summer.